Welcome to our continued program on the Iowa blog from our Rainbow Studio on what we have dubbed the gateway back to the Holocaust. It is an exceedingly somber presentation that we must make to Israel, an announcement that was first broadcast to you 2,700 years ago, but Jews, you're great at many things, but one of them is not listening, particularly when the statements come from God. So I'm here to inform you as to what you're doing now that is suicidal and the consequence of it. What Yeshaya, Isaiah, began in the 17th chapter presenting was that the government out of Damascus and Syria would fall. He was right. That the buildings in and around Damascus would be rendered a twisted heap of rubble. According to satellite imagery, the number is 106,000. 26,000 are in Damascus itself that are destroyed. Prophecy fulfilled. That Syria would be the domain of terrorists. Well, the Islamic State is now running Syria, prophecy fulfilled. That those Islamic terrorists in Syria would league with those in Jordan that presented themselves as if they were outcasts or refugees. Prophecy clearly fulfilled. And that Ephraim, which is Israel, would respond in a provocative way such that the problem is exacerbated. And Israel has invaded southern Syria and has launched, I think, in the range of 7,000 aerial bombardments of Syria since the Islamic State took over the country. And from there, it says that Israel would be narrowed at the waist, that nations working under clandestine means would force Israel to give up its heart, which is, of course, the imposition of a Palestinian state, a two-state solution, as they call it. And that this two-state solution, this forfeiture of Israeli land for peace, would make the nation indefensible, and therefore would be a prelude to war, just as Neville Chamberlain's forfeiture of the high ground of Czechoslovakia led directly to World War II and to the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. The prophet goes on to say that the timing of this event would be concurrent with or immediately precede the Shabuah harvest. The Shabuah harvest is the harvest of sevens. It occurs on 26 May 2026, 7 years before the Messiah, Son of God, and our returning King arrives in Jerusalem with Yahweh. And he therefore gives us the time. He gives us the place that this series of events will emanate out of, tells us that the perpetrators will be terrorists and that the vulnerability of Israel is as a result of land for peace, making the country indefensible, and says that it will happen on or before May 22nd, 2026. Well, it's quite a prophecy. And what that means is that, of course, knowing this well in advance, that when Donald Trump won the election, I recognized that he would be president at a time when Israel is betrayed. Because so long as the United States vetoes any United Nations initiatives to sacrifice Israel, the state of Israel survives. So long as the United States continues to support Israel in terms of its defense, Israel survives. The moment the United States stops with the rest of the world being 99-1 against Israel, in a world that no nation is capable of surviving completely isolated and on its own. It's just over for Israel. Israel is indefensible. The Muslims prevail. Millions of Jews will die. So I knew when Trump won election that it was going to be Donald Trump, because I also knew what we were going to find and what I'm now sharing with you in the 18th chapter of Yeshaya, where he goes on to say that it is a country that he uses some 70 different attributes to describe as the United States. And there's only one country that fits this description. It is the United States. Yes, some degree you could bring the European Union into this woe, which is a declaration of God's animosity towards this country for not only selling weapons of mass destruction to Israel's enemies, but being part and parcel to the divestiture of Israeli land through the creation of an Islamic state carved out of the heart of Israel, making the country indefensible. And God is exceedingly angry with that. So I knew that Donald Trump was going to be the next Neville Chamberlain. I knew it the first week of November, told all that would listen that that would be the case. And of course, when you're talking to Israel, it falls on deaf ears. Israel is good at many things, but listening is not among them. They wouldn't even listen to God. So here we are. This is our reality. My job is to convey the truth as boldly, as bluntly, as broadly as is humanly possible, using every tool at our disposal, including these live stream blogs on the Yahweh blog, on Facebook, YouTube, and also on X, even Rumble, so that you might know what is going to transpire and that you might be as prepared and protected as is possible under the circumstances. So we will continue to describe the nation that Yahweh is admonishing for betraying his people. And he says, this is on behalf of a nation from different races and places. Are you aware of any nation better known for being a melting pot of many different cultures, taking people in from all around the world than America? Or is America the epitome of a nation of people of different races and places who are wont to constantly take the lead, directing others, extending their reach and influence? The United States, through both the myth of manifest destiny, where they took over North America from the native peoples, and then after World War I, decided that America was the godsend of the world, the police of the world, the only nation that mattered in the world, went off trying to influence and control the world in the manner of what's called here Tarshish, but would be the Punic peoples. Carthaginians in particular were known to do the exact same thing that America is doing now by having military bases all around the world and prioritizing its navy and establishing its coinage as the reserve currency of the world. The Carthaginians controlled trade, and they extended their influence all the way up to from the British Isles, all the way down throughout the entire Mediterranean and into to Asia. You could not trade without dealing with the United States or without dealing with the Carthaginians, and their tariffs were what throttled how much you could buy and sell around the world. The United States became the reincarnation of Carthage, although it has many of the elements also of imperial Rome, that ruthless beast that is Rome. And so we're watching here is a direct fulfillment of both of these two statements. No nation in the history of the world has for a longer period of time, or more broadly, or effectively um, imposed its influence, directing others, extending the reach, prolonging its desires to control everything, to be involved in every nuance of world affairs. It was today that I read Donald Trump, Mr. Megalomaniac himself, telling Putin, who the West, NATO and the United States started this war. If you don't know that, but the Ukraine war, it's a shame on you, but the Ukraine war is a proxy war the United States started 17 years ago against Russia and has been plotting ever since, and has supplied the majority of the weapons for Ukrainians to be used as a proxy to kill Russians. And when the Russians fought back over NATO aggression and the United States using Ukraine as a proxy to kill Russians, now everyone, including the President of the United States, want to blame the Russians for responding. And Donald Trump went ballistic on the tarmac a couple of days ago, and having a temper tantrum over Putin. And he doubled down, saying that only he alone is the only reason that bad things, really, really bad things, haven't already happened to Russia. What is he going to do? Nuke them? You imposed every form of sanction in the world, and in doing so, you and your predecessor, you've simply made a bad situation worse. You put Russia and China and Iran together, which has destabilized the world, deprived the America of your footing as the international reserve currency, to the point now the World Bank is telling Europe, here, the World Bank is funded by America, and it's telling the European Union that you play your cards right, the euro becomes the reserve currency of the world, and then you can finance your debt, build as big a debt as you want to. Of course, it makes the United States go bankrupt. But here is Trump saying, I alone, and the only reason that really, really bad stuff hasn't already happened to Russia. It's like saying, I'm going to be the one who starts World War III if I don't get my way, and I'm going to kick sand in the sandbox all along. I mean, we have a child who has no self-control running the United States. It's the living embodiment of this prophecy that we're witnessing today. And if you were to take Mashak all the way through all of its connotations, it would be those who have a prolonged desire to take things away from others, who are actively involved out in front, enticing and directing everyone at considerable cost, who have a propensity to engage in the world as if it were their own, habitually seizing whatever they desire, who control coinage and thus the means of commerce, acquiring and holding vast sums of money, continually removing people from their land, initiating and directing the seizure and acquiring of great wealth in the process, and prone to believe an altered state of reality while overextending and enriching themselves, who are also typically tall, immodest, and frequently intoxicated. Boy, did he ever. I mean, he has drawn a picture of Donald Trump. He has drawn a picture of MAGA. He has drawn a picture of what the United States has become. And listen, my passport says I'm an American. I left the United States. I'm disgusted by what we have become. I understand that there aren't good alternatives anywhere in the world, that the world is a really screwed up mess. But it is reprehensible. I've also traveled in 175 countries, so I know what the world thinks of America. I know how the rest of the world really is because of those travels. So that's a unique perspective that I bring to all of this. And my only issue here is Yeshaya's issue, which was Yahweh's issue. God is concerned about how we treat his people, Yisrael, even when God has given up on them, even when God says, listen, they're impossible, they're irascible, they're unappreciative. Even though God has and still has given up on them, he's going to resume his relationship with them. And that's the job that I have been given, is to awaken Yisrael and to cause Israel to return to Yahweh. And I've been given all the tools to accomplish that by Yahweh. And so we're going to prevail. But Just because Yahweh has said, yep, they're irascible, they're impossible, they're irritating, doesn't mean that anybody else has that right. And if you betray Israel, really bad stuff, to quote the Donald, really, really bad stuff, put in all caps, is going to happen to you. And so for the United States and Europe to betray Israel at this time is going to be the impetus for world war, and both the EU and the United States are going to pay a horrible price. That's just reality. You didn't have to do it. You did this thing. You're going to pay the price for having done this thing. It says further that they are scrubbed clean, smooth skinned, shaven, and reckless with weapons sharpened and gleaming. They are wa morat. More of a rat than they think they are, I would say, but that's not really what the Hebrew conveys. They are well scoured and overly concerned about personal hygiene. Their bodies are often so hairless that they appear polished. Most are beardless, and many have shaved heads, as contrasted with the Israelites, who are typically fairly hairy and often bearded, and so are the Islamic terrorists, who are religiously unshaven. They rush headlong and headstrong, participating in perverse actions with sharpened swords because they are an aggressive and vehement people who are fond of their military and their burnished weapons. And this is from Yarat, means to ponder the implications of Marat, and Marat is to be obstinate and headstrong, so as to drive ahead recklessly. This is a continuation of 18:2 and Yeshaya, Isaiah. So if we were asked a plethora, if we were to ponder and we were to ask a group of unbiased individuals who were informed and rational and do so worldwide, which nation typically, Mashak, takes the lead in international economic affairs, most significantly influences banking and trade, strives to extend its political influence by treating the world as if it were its own, and is prone to form military coalitions and direct multinational forces at enormous cost, all based upon the egotistical, unrealistic, and all too often intoxicated perspective of its own people. I suspect that more than 90% would answer the United States on any one of these propensities, and it would be 100% when all of these five criterion are considered together. Second, only to the countries surrounded by the Baltic Sea, the Mashak, tallest people on the planet, live in the United States, a place where superstars in politics and athletics often loom over ordinary individuals. But above all, Americans are Mashak, immodest, a self-described superpower known far and wide for its superiority complex and its condescending arrogance, never more so than under the insanity of MAGA. Now, I'm not denouncing MAGA because I am a liberal, and that's the sickening part of MAGA, is anytime you criticize the absolute irrationality and the ignorance of it, their only retort is ad hominem and say, well, then you are a liberal. You must be a Democrat. No, I'm too conservative even to be a Republican. The fact is that I am a student of history. I'm a student of the prophets. I know Yahweh. I ascribe to his ethics and morality. I know Yahweh is anti-political and anti-religious. And when you are these things, what God is saying is obvious and irrefutable. Now, considering itself the richest nation on earth, America is actually the most in debt by far and away. Considering itself the freest place on earth, America incarcerates the highest percentage of its population. Considering itself a peacemaker, America boasts and deploys the most menacing military in human history. Considering itself moral, no nation is plagued by more drug addiction, both prescribed and illicit. Combined with alcohol abuse, Americans are especially prone to intoxication. And yet, it is America's propensity to confiscate the property of others that distinguishes the nation as especially Mashak. First, it was the indigenous people of the continent who were ravaged by the westward conquest. Then it was the Mexicans in the southwest and the Spanish in the southeast. Even Hawaiians and the Eskimos fell victim to America's lust for the idea of manifest destiny. And yet, from Yahweh's perspective, nothing the United States has done has been more diabolical than leading the charge to take his land away from his people, which is what we're witnessing right now. And the motivation for it is that Donald Trump was bribed $16.5 billion to Donald Trump and company over the last 4 years for him to betray Israel. And in this context, considering the transition from the Syrian war leading to the divestiture of Israel, and now the embrace of al-Jilani by Donald Trump. He's a handsome guy. What a fighter. Strong past, really strong past. He's talking about the leader of the Islamic State that trafficked in little girls, that not only promoted gang rapes and the sales of sex slaves and the mass torturous murder of thousands and thousands of men, but who is a ruthless Islamic terrorist. A man who orchestrated burning Yazidi girls alive because they wouldn't capitulate to being gang raped. Handsome man, strong past, a real fighter. Yeah, we're in a hell of a fix, I'll tell you, as a nation. We have no moral compass. We don't even have a map anymore. And in this context, considering the transition from this deplorable government in Syria that was overthrown by the Islamic State and the worst of all Islamic terrorist organizations, now to the divestiture of Israel. Well, the only sane, informed, rational response is to view the prophet Isaiah's right and see America's role in both travesties as the reason Yahweh deployed Mashak in conjunction with his condemnation of the United States. I've shared this before, but I want to share it again. The Islamic State was born through Petraeus's awakening program. Petraeus had a real problem, and that is he wanted Iraq, because he was under this myth that we were nation building in Iraq after we took it away from Hassan Hussein, which was stupid because Saddam Hussein was the best dictator in the Islamic world. He was the most opposed to fundamentalist Islamic terrorist groups. And that doesn't change the fact he was a murderous thug. No question about it. But it's murderous thugs who rule the Islamic world. And there's two types: fundamentalist Muslim Islamic thugs who are deadly for the rest of the world, and just selfish thugs who are only a danger to their own people. Saddam Hussein was that thug. And the United States not only fought a war to protect Saudi Arabia and sacrificed its own son's blood and coin to protect Saudi Arabia and Kuwait from Saddam Hussein, something America would never do for Israel. In fact, America works against Israel, resolving and ending her wars favorably. But the United States sent troops to die, and they did die, protecting Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And it was counterproductive because evidently George Bush and Petraeus couldn't count, and they didn't realize that Shia Muslims outnumbered Sunni Muslims by 2-1, and given the right to vote, they were all going to vote for the Shia Ayatollahs, and they did. And so these Shia gangs, Mujahideen, became lethal in Iraq and deadly for the Americans. The very people that America went in there to liberate turned out to be maniacal and deadly. And these were the furthest from Al-Qaeda because they were Shia Muslims. And so Petraeus had this stupid idea of what is called this awakening program, that he would give weapons to Sunni Muslims to fight Al-Qaeda, is what he said. But no, when he was giving the weapons to the Sunni Muslims to fight the Shia Muslims so that they would stop killing Americans. And of course, what the Sunni Muslims did, they didn't go off to fight Al-Qaeda because Al-Qaeda had no presence of any kind in Iraq. Not then, not before, not never. The Sunni Muslims used those weapons to be Sunni Muslims. And they went from the awakening program with all of these arms to the Islamic State. And what the first thing they do, they appointed a man that the United States had imprisoned and released, al-Baghdadi, as their head. And then they went and they pummeled Mosul. And they funded the organization by sex trafficking Yazidi girls. Yeah, it was the United States that created the Islamic State. And the Islamic State is now the prevailing force because Turkey, a NATO member, equipped it further and enriched it to the point that they were able to overthrow the Assad regime. And now Turkey, where Erdogan is calling death to Israel as a NATO member, one that Donald Trump says, yeah, he's a really nice guy. We're best of friends. Calling death to Israel with NATO weapons, American weapons, is now in charge of Syria through its proxy, the Islamic State and al-Jilani. That's the mess America has made. You don't like it, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. Now, to appreciate Morat, it's helpful to study a bit of anatomy and anthropology. Not only are Israelites among the hairiest people and those most prone to beards today, it wasn't until very recently that the preponderance of people were clean-shaven or well-groomed. So, from Yahweh's perspective, a Yehud 2,700 years ago, Americans today would have appeared shockingly Morat, a smooth-skinned, scrubbed, and shaven people. I was all of my life until I met my wife, Leah, about 7 years ago. And she says, I like you better with a beard. Now, she's Jewish, so of course she likes a man better with a beard. And, I'm no fool. If my wife likes me better with a beard, we're going with the beard. But otherwise, I would have been as clean shaven as the rest of America. Rich is saying doesn't do a thing for you. Doesn't, well, probably wouldn't. Yeah. Obviously not. So long as my wife likes me, we're all good. When we consider that Yeshaya just witnessed all of this, and that there would be millions of Islamic jihadists flooding into Israel by comparison to those who grow their hair and their beards out in compliance with their religious beliefs, Americans would appear almost bald. But it is the nation's modern arsenal of weapons that it would have been the most startling. Morat, sharp, piercing, gleaming, as the headstrong rush headlong to burnish them in fierce combat. Do you know that America has fought well over 100 wars in its first 400 years since the European Christian colonists came here to rob the native peoples of their land? 400, every 4 years, America is in a new war. Not only has America outspend the rest of the world combined in its war apparatus and spy agencies, America outspends others in personal care and hygiene. It outguns and outpolishes everyone. The propensity to invade nations, that is something America does really well. Making bad situations worse all the time. Vietnam, bad situation, worse. Korea, bad situation, worse. Our war effort in Europe made a bad situation worse. The Soviets were in many cases worse than the Nazis. We obviously made a bad situation infinitely worse in Afghanistan, and I'm not saying that in hindsight. I was the only person 20 some years ago who on thousands of radio programs said exactly that thing, that America's, by its involvement and invasion in Afghanistan and in Iraq, is guaranteed to make both of these situations worse. I was the only one that said it at the time, only one. And I was right. Boy, when you have that kind of pronouncement against that kind of odds and make that many declarative and bold statements regarding it and get it right, you'd think people would start to listen, wouldn't you? But clearly, by any definition, America's intrusion in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq is obstinate and reckless. In order to, by the way, even America's involvement in the Pacific Theater in World War II was obstinate and reckless. America's lost 3,000 men in what should not have been a surprise attack, with literally asleep at the wheel in Pearl Harbor. And I'm not buying that America didn't know it. You would never have had all of the battleships all there ready to be sacrificed, because they were useless in war going forward anyway. But the only thing that really mattered, the aircraft carriers all out. And with America now having radar that functioned and realizing that, well, here comes an armada of planes, said, oh, well, we're not past that on. Why bother with actually reporting what the radar has picked up? But even if you get past that, do you know that America suffered 300,000 casualties for the 3,000 that died in Pearl Harbor? When you sacrifice 300,000 to avenge 3,000, you are not being moral. You are not being rational. That is not good. And yet we celebrate it like it was some kind of great victory. We're reckless. We're obstinate. In order to lure in new conscripts, the U.S. Navy presents itself in its commercials as a force for good. And yet it has been Marat, typically deployed in a reckless manner. Look what it did in the most recent deployment with the Houthis. It came in, bombed the Houthis, and we're going to bomb them like they've never been bombed before. Boy, we'll teach those Houthis a lesson. And after a month's time and spending billions of dollars, losing warplanes, losing drones, damn near losing ships, America just turned tail and ran. Oh, but declared victory, of course. But the only thing that they accomplished is galvanizing the Houthi rage, telling the Houthis that they could scare away the United States, and they did. And the United States simply sailed away and said, hey, see, they're no longer shooting at America. We're out of here. It's because you sailed your carriers away and you left everything in its place. Talk about a disaster. Look at the way we ended our war in Afghanistan. And by the way, that is Israel's problem now. It chose the wrong approach to the Muslims who raped, abducted, and murdered them on 10/7, which was, we're going to wipe out Hamas. Well, Hamas was 0.00000001% of the problem. And Gaza is Islamic, Hamas is Islamic. You could no more wipe out Hamas and Gaza than the man on the moon unless you killed every Gazan, and that would kill Israel. So it was a stupid plan, executed recklessly, and then re-engaged at a time where the world had had its fill of it, and it's proved suicidal because, as a consequence now, the world is in a position to force Israel to suffocate on a Palestinian state. And Trump is going to announce that the war is over. And, oh, but he's a peacemaker because he's going to return some of the hostages. And that's his gift. We should all praise Trump. He's the great hero returning hostage. Every one of those hostages is going to cost 100,000 Jewish lives. Every one of them. Even in its most acclaimed moment, the United States carelessly sacrificed 100 additional troops for every one of the 3,000 sailors that were needlessly killed at Pearl Harbor. And since that time, it has only gotten worse, making bad situations worse in Korea, in Somalia, in Libya, in Afghanistan, in Syria, and especially in Iraq. And now in Yemen, soon in Iran, soon in Israel, and of course in Russia, with the foolish deployment of Ukrainians as a proxy to kill Russians with Americans' weapons. Reckless, which presupposes exasperating and unexpected consequences of thoughtless and improperly planned, ignorant and irrational approaches. It defines the U.S. today. The U.S. goes back 17 years in its desire to fight the Russians in a proxy war using Ukraine. We overthrew the popularly elected government to get a government that America could bribe with weapons and all manner of graft to go and fight and kill Russians. And there was no way to win. If they prevailed with NATO weapons against Russia, Russia would retort with a nuclear strike rather than simply die. And if you lose, millions die in the process, countries go bankrupt, and you end up looking like a fool. It's lose-lose. And yet that's the path that 4 presidents have pursued, and many congressmen and women and senators. The approach defines America economically, politically, diplomatically, militarily. The nation has devalued its currency with irresponsible spending and is unable to pay its bills, apart from its reserve currency status, which it is on the precipice of losing, which is the only reason that Trump capitulated to everything Saudi Arabia wanted, a defense treaty where America puts its own sons and daughters, their blood on the line to defend Saudi Arabia, give Saudi Arabia nuclear capability, giving Saudi Arabia access to artificial intelligence and the manufacturing of chips, and $150 billion worth of weapons, all to maintain the petrodollar status, just to give the appearance of slightly prolonged solvency with its debt. And of course, with their giving Saudi Arabia for the prolonging of the petrodollar is Israel, served up on a silver platter on Air Whore 1. Politically, its leaders tongue-lash the world. Look at what Trump just did to Xi and then to Putin and to the Ayatollahs that he's trying to negotiate with, quote unquote. to the European Union, to the Canadians, to his proxy in Ukraine, to South Africa, although the South Africans have it coming. Recent victims include, of course, China, Russia, Israel. And knowing that it is disliked and distrusted, America's National Security Administration has broken its own constitution to unlawfully spy on its own citizens as well as its allies. And when this is disclosed, rather than celebrate the person who gave us this news, we ostracize him and send him off to Russia and vilify Edward Snowden for doing so. The disclosures by WikiLeaks and Assange demonstrate that the nation's diplomats are morally bankrupt, as well as the leaders of its military. And for that, we accused him of falsely of raping a woman and put him in prison and pursuing false trumped up charges just because the nation doesn't like its underwear exposed. This is really badly stained. This nation is morally bankrupt, habitually putting Americans in league with the least reputable people and institutions on the earth. And never in the history of man has a nation's military been so consistently counterproductive, engendering lives, endangering them, then protecting them by making one bad situation worse after another. That's what happened in Afghanistan. That's what happened in Iraq. And it was inevitable. There was no other option. That's what happened in Yemen. That's what's happening right now in Iran. That's what's happening right now in Israel. And yet, nothing any nation has ever done is more wrought, irresponsible, indeed ignorant, irrational, and immoral, as well as ill-advised in its invasion of Iraq, which set everything Yahweh has described in this prophecy into motion. It is the catalyst for all of it, including the dismemberment of Israel. Even if that consequence was unintended, there is no excuse because the outcome was easily foreseeable. So much so, I spoke and wrote vociferously about it beginning in the fall of 2001 and have been forthright and consistent ever since. As for Marat's more benign attributes, they are also applicable more than most Americans are clean-shaven. In fact, the current craze is to remove all body hair, even from women. And when it comes to personal hygiene and healthcare, Americans spend over $800 per month on average, leading the world in this category. Boy, there must be a lot of people spending $1,600 because I doubt I spend $8 a month. I use rainwater, and and a bar of soap will last me for months. So I am ruining that average for sure. All right, it goes on to say, now that you all know I must smell really bad. No, rainwater is a good thing. I strongly encourage it. These people, El-Am, this nation and its army, its citizenry based upon familiar religious and political ties, are frightening and feared, even dreadful, while at the same time respected for their awesome power. Yare. They cause great distress through intimidation and awful acts, but they're also venerated and revered by some for their achievements, capabilities, and status, especially the awesome sight of their missiles shooting through the air, from here to there and beyond into a future time, from a considerable distance away and out of a future period. Emphatically, one individual nation is from a place and time considerably outside the current reference of the writer, doing all of these things. 18:2, continuing, this must be the most power-packed single verse in the totality of power-packed single verses, and we've encountered our share of them. Yare, which can be translated as revere or fear, can speak of earning respect or terrorizing intimidation. So it too is an apt depiction of the United States circa 2025 as the nation supports and threatens Israel in the wake of the October 7th massacre. There are those who admire America's early economic achievements and current military capabilities, but others dread the nation's intimidating and frightening displays of shock and awe and lack of dependability. America is the world's worst ally. I mean, if you allied with the United States in Afghanistan, you're now dead. If you allied with the United States in Vietnam, you are dead. If you, in fact, the foe in Vietnam, the communist government, is now in the top 3 trading partners with the United States, being rewarded. You look at Syria, the Islamic State that was so devastating to Americas is now receiving American money and support through al-Jilani. We are devastating as and what we do. And it's surprising anybody believes this. Given the rhetoric, the United States sacrificed the lives of its sons and daughters to defend Saudi Arabia and Kuwait from neighboring Iraq, but has never fired a shot to defend Israel from the millions of Muslims who want to annihilate the nation. It did not happen in 1948, 1967, and 1973, or in 2023. There is no making peace with Muslims. There is no circumstance that will be acceptable to them. And yet, that is the deal that Trump is now advancing. There is no truth that Muslims will not twist and then invert. Read the opening line of the 9th Surah. Study the story of Hudaybiyah. Let there be no mistake. Yahweh wasn't describing the aspiring and declining superpowers extant during this time, Egypt, Assyria, and Babylonia. He isn't depicting those of the prophet's future and our past, Persia, Greece, or Rome. This is not about the Mongols, the Byzantines, or the Ottomans. There was no nation of Syria to destroy during their time, and Israel would not be whole again until long after they were gone. God is therefore speaking of a day in the distant future, and therefore our time after the fall of the government in Syria. Just here now on the precipice of the harvest of Shabuah, 7 years prior to his return, and therefore May 22nd, 2026. My perspective has been shaped over the years by Yahweh's teaching, so I'm not among those who are impressed with wealth or military prowess. I'd rather America have no military. I neither respect nor fear it, but it is safe to say that the vast preponderance of people would view America's economic, political, and military capability as either frightening and dreadful or respect it as awesome. And there isn't currently another nation invoking such passions on either end of the scale, much less both. Yes, I just said America would be better off without a military. So long as America honors the Second Amendment, it cannot be invaded, cannot be occupied. It's just that simple. And that's why Thomas Jefferson insisted on the Second Amendment and why he was so opposed to a standing military. He knew that it would be used egregiously and that it would sap the nation's wealth. And that's exactly what has happened. So, no, I'm wholly opposed to the U.S. military. It is used provocatively around the world, and it is not a force for good. And it is exceedingly costly to the United States. In today's world, the only way to effectively project a force, though, and to meddle in other nations is via an aircraft carrier battle group. The closest thing Russia has to offer still burns diesel fuel and spends most of its time rotting away in a dry dock. The Chinese have one operational, another two still under construction, although the first is a story in itself. The hull was laid in Russia and then sold because the Russians couldn't afford to finish it. The British are trying to maintain two of them, but mostly for their ancient and essentially useless Harrier jump jets. And that means that there is no other nation matching the criterion just delineated apart from the United States. And in reality, it has 13 enormous strike groups to zero. If deployed, however, those 13 won't survive the first week of any world war. That's a long story, but I've had my conclusions as a pilot and student of these things proven by the U.S. War College computers, supercomputers. So I can tell you for certain that the U.S. military is aware that it cannot deploy any of its 13 battle groups without knowingly putting all of them in such harm's way that they would lose them all. They are not survivable. The only asset that America and Russia have that is survivable in a war between superpowers, only one. You know what that is? Submarine. Ballistic submarines. And if they're used, there's no world to go back to. So the only survivable asset is the asset that destroys the world. That's our reality. If you don't like it, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. Now, the phrase men hu wa hala'a is especially telling because it reveals a great deal more about the people, place, and time associated with this nation. Its warships have men come out of a place which is hala'a, a great distance away, beyond the scope of the writer to fully understand. Hu, which this one individual entity, hala, is from a distinctly different time pertaining to a distant future period. This, therefore, cannot be about the neighboring or ancient menaces, not Babylon, Assyria, nor Egypt or Greece, not Rome or Persia. These are not Byzantines or the Ottomans. This time was not then. It is now. This place was not there. It is here. This population, which is comprised of many different races, Goy, the Gentile nation, routinely spews out nonsense in a strange foreign language, talking down to others while continually marching off to war based upon their condescending and moronic rhetoric. Boy, do you think that Isaiah actually met Donald Trump, acting like a great power, MAGA, all of which deserves to be mocked and ridiculed? Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. Foolishly judges others in senseless speeches which parrot the same meaningless phrases, vomiting up their blathering blah, 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 and thus must be disparaged and derided. They are always trying to expand and impose their influence, even their faith, establishing the rules while senselessly drawing the lines in the sand, eagerly throwing others out of their land. Hoping to bind others together in a common cause as true believers and rule over them, building coalitions they control, dictating the one and only standard they deem acceptable, with the wicked steadfastly attempting to destroy the lives of the righteous, spewing out the inhabitants of the land from Ka'ah, readily binding nations together into coalitions with eager expectations. A continuation of Isaiah 18:2. While most countries are formed on the basis of a single ethnicity, there are few places accurately described as Goy, a nation of people from different races and places. But one particular country is regarding as the ultimate melting pot, an asylum for the masses, and home to more ethnicities and cultures than any other. America is a compilation of nations, an identity that serves as the country's trademark. It is listing of accomplishments Americans by ethnic or national origin. Wikipedia presents people from 175 distinct places and cultures. But Goy is just one of many descriptive terms Yahweh's deployed to warn those living during the aftermath of the fall of the Syrian government, during the time that Israel is about to be reduced in size, during the time when a tidal wave of Islamic terrorists will flood into the promised land. The one and only nation described by these events and depicted in these words is above all others of particular concern to God. This is a woe to the United States. In this time in history, in this flow of events, from this perspective, there is but one qualifying candidate who is described in every word of this, some to the point you just have to say, oh my God, he obviously heard a speech given by Donald Trump to the MAGAs. Reminding us now, a second time. By the way, I should say before I do that, I'm always very careful when Goy is singular and plural. When it is plural, it can be speaking of people from many different ethnicities. When it's singular, it's speaking of one nation with these criteria. And also, I should say that Goy is based upon the Walking Dead, carcasses of people. It is like the zombie apocalypse. Particularly of pagan peoples. And Christianity is a very pagan religion. It grew out of Babylon, and it embodies all of the paganism of the Greek religion, particularly Dionysus, of the Roman religion, the sibling oracles, all the way through its fixation on the Bacchus. Jesus bears a name that's very similar to Zeus, and it speaks of the Walking Dead. And when you look at college campuses and people protesting in the streets with their scarf of Islamic terrorism and flag of genocide, and them vehemently blaming the victims while encouraging their Muslim partners to kill, which I see as the zombie apocalypse. These are Goy gonna run amok. The Walking Dead. Reminding us now a second time that he is addressing a single nation comprised of people from different ethnicities and cultures. Goy was repeated before Ka was deployed to address America's strange, amalgamated language and nonsensical rhetoric. The sheer volume of veritable vomit spewed out the mouths of American politicians, pastors, generals, journalists, as if there were such a thing anymore, professors, bloggers, talk radio hosts, by the influencers, by the Candace Owens of the world, the Carlson Tuckers, the Rogans, Alex Jones, millions of followers, each of them, and their anti-Semitic rhetoric is just disgusting. It's deplorable. I'm not so much condemning the Carlson Tuckers and the Alex Jones and the Candace Owens of the world as I am their audiences. Shame on you. What's wrong with you? It's just vomit spewed out on behalf of politics and religion. Ignorance made to seem like it's the nectar of the gods. You got radio hosts and economists that just boggle the mind. The return to Marxism and socialism with a comprehensive history of total failure, deprivation of human rights, um, violence in the extreme, and complete economic failure. And today's youth are so indoctrinated in progressive academic institutions, they're out promoting this rot as if they're too young to have even recognized the comparison between North and South Korea, East and West Germany. The success of the USSR compared to Western Europe, of Taiwan relative to China. It was only after China went and started promoting enterprise zones and promoting free enterprise, and America went the other way and became socialistic, that the tide was turned. And yet, 80% of today's young people are exceedingly liberal to the point of being socialists. Boggles the mind that people can be that ignorant and think they're smart, believe they're smart. They don't think anything. But it is America's penchant for marching off to war. Yashaya would have been attuned to Aramaic, the language of Babylon. It was surprisingly similar to Hebrew, as were the Moabite dialects and the Phoenician. Phoenician and Hebrew, again, very, very similar in their alphabets. But English would have been exceedingly strange. And so would have been the televised speeches of the nation's leaders, whether political or religious. Now, obviously, he was able to understand them because he gave us a really wonderful summation of them. And here I am speaking English, and I have no apologies because it is the language that Yahweh chose for Yada Yahweh. Because, well, 45% of the world's Jewish population lives in the United States, where English is the primary language. 45% live in Israel, and of those that can be reached, they've all studied English, and they're all bilingual in English. And of the rest, the language that is most common to them is English. So it is the language that Yahweh chose for this mission to awaken his people, because it will resonate with more Jews than any other. But I can tell you that when Yashaya heard these numbskulls spewing out their nonsense in English, he was horrified. And that's why this woe exists to the United States. But no one could have fathomed Trump 2.0. Trump 1.0, what he said, it made you cringe. But what he did was typically reasonably sound. Trump 2.0 is just a house of fire. What he does is as bad as what he says. And what he says is so far beyond the pale. It's exactly as Yashaya has described it. And I'm not going to say that Trump is alone and stupid. You listen to the rhetoric of Starmer and of Macron. Well, Macron's not going to be saying much. He just got walloped by his wife. And she about took him out. And of the liberals in Europe, I mean, they've lost their minds. And then you tune into someplace like X, which is the literal sewer of human expression. Now, Israel was seldom, if ever, imperialistic or sought to throw others out of their land, much less seek to expand their borders. Israel would, on occasion, pay tribute to avoid destruction, but never built coalitions or controlled international affairs as is done by the United States. Most of all, Yashaya would have been appalled by America's propensity to steal the land belonging to others, as it did belong to the native populations. But America has been proficient at that, while lecturing others against even occupying their own homeland. While the United States presidents have stood on more than their share of soapboxes and asserted themselves, Barack Hussein Obama, prior to Trump 2.0, was at least the most imposing and verbose of all time. It was as if he believed that he was the conductor of the world's orchestra. Play and sing along, acquiesce to his terms, fall in line, capitulate, or else. Such was the case with his condescending attitude towards Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel, and the issue of the greatest concern to Yahweh because he is threatening to throw Jews out of their homes. Biden, of course, was a slightly milder version, but that made him more dangerous. And now Trump is the one who has taken such enormous bribes to betray Israel while giving lip service to "I love Jews," while at the same time betraying them. Makes him exceedingly dangerous. So do not dismiss the devastating consequence of well, Barack Obama's speech to Muslims, where he, from the birthplace of the Muslim Brotherhood, the very people who created the myth of Palestine, resurrected it from Hadrian. This was Al Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. He gave his "A New Beginning" proclamation to inspire an Islamic reformation, thereby green lighting Islamic jihadism, lighting the fuse for the next world war. Now, if that was not bad enough, Donald Trump has been the ultimate expression of what God hates about America. He's a megalomaniac. He's beyond a narcissist. So enamored was he at the grandiose way he was treated in Saudi Arabia twice now, even when it was proven that the nation's crown prince orchestrated the murder and dismemberment of a Washington Post journalist. Donald Trump wouldn't condemn it. He covered it up. An act because he didn't want to forestall the sale he had made of weapons, totaling a staggering $100 billion 4 years ago and another $150 billion now. And if you wonder why Donald Trump flies around in his fancy airplane with the Trump blazoned all over it, why? He lives in Mar-a-Lago and flies back and forth while he went from, prior to his first term, putting out one bankruptcy after another, failing in Atlantic City, failing everywhere he went, with his golf course developments failing, with his casinos failing, with every venture he was involved in failing, crumbling around him, to now wallowing in billions of dollars. It's all because of the bribes, $16.5 billion of them that we know of, from the Saudis, from the Qataris, and from the Emirates. MAGA, you need a new president because the Muslims have bought yours. America, of course, was built on Mebusha, aggressively subduing and trampling down the native populations from sea to shining sea and beyond. The nation was born ugly, merciless, ruthless, and violent. From that time, the first European profiteer invaded the continent, and that's what they were. Just 400 years ago, the colonists and the country's citizens thereafter have waged 101 wars, one for every 4 years. And the one that is most likely to go nuclear is the proxy war that America fought so hard to initiate with Russia through the Ukraine. It aggressively conquers and subdues, trampling down people and kicking them out. Wa Mubosha. It is antagonistic and destructive. It treads over others, putting them under its feet, imposing its will, often partnering with enemies, subjugating those it can control, causing their downfall. It is polluted and rejected, blind and loathsome, seen as educating the world while stripping it bare. From Bush. Desecrating the most everything of value in the manner of a blind and oblivious child, imposing his will, ruining the lives of others while destroying countries. Boy, that is Trump 2.0. With all that he has done in just a matter of Well, less than 200 days. The world is falling apart. This reads this to reveal the way and to provide a reference which leads to where to find the country, the Eretz, this land and territory. It is divided, Basha, cut through by rivers, Nahum, streams, flowing water, indicative of very large population of people who travel extensively. Yashaya, freedom is from Yahweh. Isaiah 18:2, still in part. And we'll finish on this thought. While Asher, Eretz, Baza, Harim, this country, it is divided by rivers, is likely the intended meaning, and it would point to today's, taint anyone who is familiar with geography, right back to the United States, which is dissected by more large tributaries and rivers than any other nation on earth. There is an alternative rendering, which is worth considering. Asher, Eretz, Baza, Naharim means also to reveal the way and provide a reference which leads to where to find this country. It is seen as contemptible and despised for having traveled extensively, and one that is hugely biased in favor of Asherah, the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of God, of the Roman Catholic Church. And where is the current Pope from? That would be America. Why? Because of the prevalence of Roman Catholicism in America. It's one prophetic statement after another. And this one prophetic statement, Yeshaya 18:2, we have been afforded 50 additional insights to the country comprised of 50 states, which is at the crosshairs of this woe. And we will consider them all when we return to this review of how America has opened the gates back to the Holocaust. As we conclude this episode and expect one more on this theme tomorrow. I thank you for listening to the Iowa blog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn.